On the 30th of July 1992, the Cameroon Tribune's major headline read in bold, "Madame is dead." The state media officially reported that the former First Lady of Cameroon, Madame Jeanne-Irene Biya, had died after a brief illness, even though weeks before her demise, she had appeared in public beaming in great health. But the rumor mill was buzzing aloud that the sudden death of Madame, as she was fondly called, was as a result of a planned execution. And where was her beloved husband, you ask? Well, apparently, President Paul Biya of Cameroon had traveled on an official visit to Dakar in Senegal 2 days prior to Madame's death, some speculated for alibi reasons. But before we get to the crux of this unfortunate saga of Jeanne-Irene Biya, let us first briefly examine her backstory. Madame Biya was born Jeanne-Irene Atiam Domin in 1935 in Monengombo within the Ndom commune of the Nyong and Mumfu division in French Cameroon. She grew up in the Ava-Ava aristocratic family and was educated by her uncle Thomas Ndomin, an entrepreneur who was the young brother of Jean-Louis Ava-Ava, the then president of the Cameroon National Assembly parliamentary group. Jeanne-Irene Atiam trained as a midwife at the Nantes School of Midwives in France on a Cameroon government scholarship. During her time in Nantes, she met Paul Biya, a fellow Cameroonian who was then pursuing a higher education in France in 1952. Their courtship culminated in marriage, and they tied the knot on the 2nd of September of 1961 in Antony, a southern suburb of Paris. After their nuptials, Madame Jeanne-Irene Biya returned to Cameroon to work as a qualified midwife in the Yaoundé Central Hospital, where she was socially committed and dedicated to pediatric care, emphasizing on child welfare, reflecting her background as a trained midwife. Sadly, the union between Paul and Jeanne-Irene Biya produced no biological children, though the couple later adopted a child. And on this note is where I want to point out the sad irony of life, that as benevolent and as motherly as Madame Jeanne-Irene Biya was known to be, life refused to bless her with a child of her own, especially so when her career as a trained midwife positioned her to help other women into birthing their own children. And in a twist of fate brought on by a cruel game of life, she adopted Frank Biya, who was Paul Biya's son, born from an extramarital relationship with one of Madame Biya's relatives. Rumor has it that Frank Biya's real mother is allegedly purported to be either Madame's sister or niece. Allegedly. So what she did was to integrate the boy child into the family and raise him as her son within the Biya household. Consequently, Frank Biya was publicly regarded as the couple's only child during Madame Jeanne's lifetime, who is now the heir apparent and successor of Paul Biya's authoritarian rule. I guess in some sort of bizarre twist of fate, Madame Biya felt like her husband's infidelity had produced a child who she could claim as her own and who would cover her shame of being infertile. And by claiming the illegitimate child as her own, despite the incestuous nature of the child's origin, she accepted him mainly because they shared the same bloodline. Madame Jeanne-Irene Biya was way too good for this world. She is remembered as one of the biggest philanthropists in Cameroon's history. During her lifetime, Madame Biya devoted herself to humanitarian work, especially through the Cameroon Red Cross, where she focused on helping the poor, the sick, disaster victims, vulnerable women, and children. She was also known for her compassion and her hands-on approach, often visiting hospitals and communities in order to ensure help reached all those who were in need. Her generosity was mostly done quietly without seeking praise. And yet, her generous heart, her empathic soul, her beautiful spirit could not shield her from the evil that lurked in the corner, ready to quench her light. Madame Jeanne-Irene Biya died suddenly in the early hours of 29th of July 1992 from an undisclosed illness. Rumors spread out quickly in all of Cameroon that her death occurred in a mysterious manner, while her husband had suspiciously left the country for a meeting 2 days prior to Madame's death, where his presence in the meeting was not mandatory but was necessary to provide him with an alibi. Moreover, the two European Reverend sisters whom Madame Biya had visited before her death had also been executed at the town of Njum, perhaps because they must have known the truth surrounding the circumstances of her death. Now the real question is, how can a first lady, a public figure, one who is heavily protected by state security and with access to the best medical care money can buy, just die suddenly with no rhyme, no reason? And to make matters worse, the state media in Cameroon had been so economical with information regarding her brief illness as the purported cause of her death. But here is the kicker of this story. President Paul Biya was the suspected culprit of Madame Biya's sudden death, with reasons to boot. Firstly, the president did not allow an autopsy to be performed on his wife to determine the cause of her death. Secondly, the president did not allow Madame's body to be laid to state for public viewing, as it was tradition. And thirdly, the president was in a rush to bury Madame's body, possibly a week after her death. And while the above reasons were not strong enough to convict the president in the court of law, these reasons fueled many rumors of a possible ritual sacrifice amid a series of other suspicious deaths within the presidential circle. This means that Madame's death was allegedly a human sacrifice as a result of sorcery done for the benefit of one or more people, which had taken place amidst ongoing political activities, including planned rallies for early elections. Therefore, it's not far-fetched to believe that ritual killing could happen among the rich and powerful, because many parts of Africa majorly practice this kind of occultism, more so for wealth and power, and Cameroon is known especially for this kind of mysticism, which blends indigenous animist beliefs with secret societies and practiced by many local tribes. Was Madame Biya assassinated for spiritual reasons? Only God knows. Is the president guilty of her death? Only time will tell. Am I shocked by the rumor of ritual sacrifice? Not at all. Do I believe in karma? Yes, indeed. Needless to say, Madame Jeanne-Irene Biya was buried in Voveka in the southern Cameroon, the birthplace of her husband. On the 25th of August 1992, barely a month after her burial, President Paul Biya announced his presidential bid to seek another term as president and was successfully re-elected on the 11th of October 1992. In 1994, President Biya remarried Chantal Biya and has remained the president of Cameroon ever since. Now, to all of you watching this video, here lies the moral of this story that you should glean from. This life is too short to trust any man. No matter what, put your trust in God and only in Him. It's been 34 years since the death of Madame Jeanne-Irene Biya, a beautiful soul whose life was cut short before her time. If there's any justice in the world, then may the good Lord remember your name even in death and deliver justice to your enemies. Amen. Madame Jeanne-Irene Biya will forever be remembered for her benevolence, for her philanthropy, and mostly for her love of the people of Cameroon.